In Resident Evil, you collect keys. You bring those keys to their corresponding doors to open them. I'm going somewhere with this, let me cook. Keys take up room in your inventory. That room is shared with all the other items you might want to carry. Weapons, ammo, healing. You decide what to carry from one of the game's save rooms. The problem? On your way from the save room to your objective, you'll run into enemies. Now, speaking very generally, you'll want to minimize enemy contact by minimizing back and forth trips between points of interest, which means you want to maximize game progress on every trip, opening as many doors and collecting as many keys as you can before heading back to safety. The challenge here is uncertainty. You often don't know exactly the types of adversity you'll encounter, and you also don't know which keys might come into play after a locked door. Bring too many keys and you may get caught by a group of enemies and no shotgun to take them out with efficiently. You might use your final inventory slot on a blue herb rather than another key item because you're worried you'll be poisoned on the way, only to realize your concern was unfounded and now you'll have to deal with the same enemies again on your second trip. These are interesting dilemmas, and you could argue that they are the result of strategic decisions, because when choosing your item loadout, you're drawing on your knowledge of whatever locks and enemies you've encountered thus far. Now, I recently did multiple runs of the vanilla game, the director's cut, and the remake, and one thing I felt very viscerally is how knowledge persists across playthroughs. My Jill run on Real Survivor difficulty had me with my pants down a couple times, where poor planning left me stranded without healing items or ink ribbons. However, trying the same difficulty again as Chris, I wanted to see what would happen if I never deviate from the critical path. No unnecessary trips, pure efficiency. And I was shocked how much smoother it went, and honestly, how much flatter it felt as an experience. If I know that an item won't be necessary on a trip, Jill and especially Chris will suddenly feel a lot lighter. You get to the catacombs using the square crank, and then deeper in you find the hex crank. You may be led to believe it's this insane juggling act between the two, but from the moment you receive the hex crank, the other one is never used again. On your first playthrough, one-off items like the dog whistle or the bag of chemicals might seem ominous. You are weighing yourself down for a good chunk of your playthrough not knowing where they might be used. But when you do know, that shit is staying in the item box until it's actually needed. What we have here is Metroidvania lock and key progression intersecting with inventory mechanics, which then affects moment-to-moment gameplay. Before I proceed, let me look at the style of progression more generally. You have a bunch of doors. Door in this case is symbolic. We're basically talking any type of gate that either blocks or facilitates access to the next room. You check all of the doors. Most of them will be locked. If you value your time, you'll take note of how a particular door may be opened, indicated in Resident Evil's case, for example, by an engraving on the handle. Once you find a door that is unlocked, you go down that path as far as the game will let you. Eventually, you'll find an item that somehow relates to one of the locked doors you previously ran across. If you manage to connect the dots at that exact moment, well, there you go. You've connected the dots, you know where to go. And if the exact location to use the key escapes you, well, just check every door again until you progress. Now, you could come up with a way to make this sound like interesting gameplay. Remembering clues lets you play through the game faster and more efficiently, and in a game with limited resources like Resident Evil, avoiding unnecessary encounters will be a very obviously felt improvement to your run. This sounds like perceptive routing is being rewarded, and that could be considered a skill, but how much that implies on a first playthrough is questionable. You can plan for a door that you've come across, but you can't plan for what's behind it when you don't know what's behind it. So, And on the other hand, once you do know, how much game is actually left? By the way, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing and also checking out my Ko-fi page where you can support me directly. And in exchange, there's a bunch of extra goodies. There's monthly bonus content and behind the scenes posts and stuff like that. I would really appreciate it if you gave it a look. Thank you. In a lot of Metroidvanias, the critical path doesn't necessarily have to follow a discernible logic. You could unlock the Ice Beam, see 8 Ice Beam doors on your map, and then realize that 7 of them just lead to more dead ends. Metroid Dread has so much heavy-handed guidance that I just kinda cruise through it, whereas playing Metroid Prime without the hint system has me bumbling around like a headless chicken when there's no way to logically deduce what is ultimately still a linear way forward. You have to use trial and error. Anecdotally, it seems incredibly rare for these games to hit that sweet spot in between where the game does provide ways to deduce the critical path other than A, look at the fucking map, and or B, literally guess. In Resident Evil, it manifests as this uncomfortable, uncanny valley of game design. The unique thing the series has over other games is this element of strategically planning for potential dangers ahead. To consciously make a plan, you need knowledge. Too little knowledge, and you're just checking rooms one by one. Not strategic. But with too much knowledge, it tips over into a pretty lame point-and-click adventure game. Density of real stress points in the game aside, we'll talk about that. If you're playing decently well, it is kinda crazy how easily you can secure these completely safe routes. In the final stretch of my Chris run, I was able to ping-pong between the 2 major save rooms with no opposition. Keep in mind, on this difficulty, the item boxes are disconnected, which you would think adds this major complication, more trips, more enemy encounters, but I had more than enough resources to either burn every zombie in advance or take out any stray Crimsonettes with the Magnum or grenade launcher as Jill. Now, this combat is sorta nothing. I'm not gonna justify this claim with a full fucking analysis, cause come on. Obviously, a bunch of my runs were without lock-on, and I was really stretching to find the hidden sauce there. This is actually crazy without lock-on.
He's trying to gas it up.
I was about to say it. I think you'd be surprised just how little even this actually changes things. You can only do so much with a combat system where you stand in place to aim and attack a mostly unreactive hurt box. It will always boil down to finding the safest spot and unloading as much as you can while the enemy slowly approaches you. The super limited control system just doesn't give the designers many affordances to overwhelm you with enemies or obstacles. Anything that's more agile has to be knocked over with one of the bigger weapons or avoided entirely. It's not that complicated. You can remove lock-on, you can encourage multi-target or up-close aiming, but it's clear the series was at a long drawn-out impasse here before, you know. And this is where I get to why I find Resident Evil this super fascinating case study in game design. I can think of very few games where a relatively consistent set of developers went to the effort of remixing this one core experience so many times. Chris, Jill, Director's Cut, Remake, Real Survivor, Invisible Enemies. As players, we've had the privilege to witness all these ideas being stacked on top of what is ultimately one game over time. So lots of little variations and surprises, both inherent to the Spencer Mansion adventure and across multiple iterations. I'm not building up to some big gotcha here, but I can't help but characterize all this stuff as novelty. If I know Forrest is gonna get up and attack me as soon as I walk to the back of the room, where, by the way, there's nothing even to grab, there's no reason for me to go there, I'm just not gonna go to the back of the room. If I know that combining my gun and some ammo while the game is paused will reload my weapon with no penalty, I will never go through a reload animation again. If I know my character moves faster without a gun equipped and equipping guns doesn't carry a time penalty, same thing. If I know I need the broken shotgun to not get squished to death here, you get the fucking point. We can even extrapolate this to subversions in the remake. The delay on the dog jump scare has become iconic in its own right, but I want you to think through this from a design perspective. You did the original game, you set out to remake it. You identify that the same jump scares will not hit for returning players, and then you put all this emphasis on new jump scares that are also only effective the first time you do them. I feel similarly about the fuel canister toward the end of Remake that has a chance of exploding whenever you run or use a firearm. If you know this is coming, guess what? You can just take out every enemy that might have a chance of fucking you over in advance. And then it's just a slow, boring walk. At first I thought those crawly things respawn indefinitely, which I think would have suited the design of the section, but nope. I want to tie this whole argument together by talking about Crimson Heads. Earlier, I explained how in my runs they were at worst a momentary annoyance rather than a serious threat, because I distributed my resources just right. And again, this is on Real Survivor, where the disconnected item boxes make carrying the right tools for the job a big extra chore. Now, let's think through this for a minute. Imagine if the game were less generous with resources. Let's say it's to the point where some of your main routes will always inevitably have a Crimson Hat you can't take out. What would really change? I would bait out an attack, dodge, then run past. I'm not saying this is consistently that easy, you would probably get hit a couple times, but it would ultimately turn into a game about passing this one execution check and retrying it as many times as necessary. What I'm trying to say is that I don't know if this style of design really scaled. It's either pure point-and-click resource distribution or more or less simplistic execution checks. It's not like these two things don't cohere at all, there is a clear relationship, but just like with the Metroidvania design, it's an uncanny valley. My favorite moment across this whole experience happened on my Chris Arrange mode playthrough. I just come back from the guardhouse. I used my second to last ink ribbon to log in my progress, and I had almost no ammo to defend myself with. I knew there were a couple of rooms littered with hunters that I'd left unexplored that would provide me with the necessary resources to continue my playthrough. And so I made this one epic run where I had to dodge multiple tough enemies in an unbroken sequence, and interact with some of the more challenging maze-like room layouts under that pressure. And when I pulled it off, it felt fucking euphoric.
You're about to save, right? You're about to save. You don't have any save ribbons at all. Is that correct? Okay. You have some save ribbons.
I have one.
Please, God.
I got one. That's that's crazy. Oh, the resources are being managed.
See, look. This game's good as fuck.
This
game's fucking sick.
Dude, maybe this is the only time this has happened, that like somebody ran out of ink ribbons. The design is working as intended, finally.
Exactly. Zito's the first person to make this game look good.
The issue with Resident Evil is not lack of replay value or that it's too easy or something. It's that the design is just not set up in a way where it can deliver those types of moments consistently. I haven't even mentioned how much time you spent doing banal adventure game bullshit. The amount of empty traversal and shallow puzzles I had to do on my first run of the Saturn version with Jill completely suffocated that experience. It's spread way too thin before you even get to the real issues with the game's approach to strategy and resource management. Now, the elephant in the room here, of course, is RE4. At their core, the old Resis seem to present a binary dilemma. Do I take out the enemy, or do I run past it? You check that against your resources and against the level design, and hopefully at this point I've illustrated why, in 9 out of 10 cases, that decision isn't all that compelling. RE4 solves the contradiction simply by embracing combat. Now it's, I have to take out this entire room, how efficiently can I do it? It raises this question and then makes the answer fuzzy by raising the nuance of every single element. You're much more agile and the levels are more open, so now you can be surrounded from all sides rather than a single point. You have to actually frickin' aim, and where exactly you aim has all these cascading nuances. Weapons can now have much finer differences in fire rate or spread, rather than being, do I hit one guy? Or two guy? And long-term consequences are now reinforced with this insanely elegant upgrade system that individualizes every playthrough, not just in singular moments where you fuck up like a dumbass.
Are you still trying to make it to the end of the game tonight?
I mean, it's 2 a.m. Last night I stopped at 3.
I mean, given how long it's taken to do everything up to now, I don't know if...
Part of me can't help but latch onto that arrange mode experience I described earlier. Is there a way to distill the classic Resi format into that type of experience and then have it land consistently as well? You could imagine a super compressed version of these games with a sort of roguelike / permadeath design where you're just going through enemy rooms. I'm almost thinking something more like Spelunky, where you have a clear goal, but you might have to zigzag a bit to get there, and how easily you can deal with enemies and obstacles changes depending on the resources you acquire. Now, Spelunky obviously has much richer systems to lean on than Resident Evil, but spiritually, I don't think they're too far off. Another comparison point that comes up a lot in my bubble is is the Mystery Dungeon series, also known as Shiren the Wanderer. In terms of ethos, it's really all there. You have a goal, you have enemies that you best avoid, and you have limited resources to get you out of a tight spot. You're carefully planning to not get into those situations in the first place, but due to the roguelike design, there will always be shit you can't account for, and then it's up to you to choose from your bag of tricks as effectively as possible. There's this indie game that recently released called House of Necrosis, which literally slaps a PS1 Resident Evil aesthetic on this exact gameplay, so I don't think the connection is that abstract. Alright, that's the video. Thank you guys for watching. This is my first scripted essay, completely scripted, not improvised whatsoever essay. I wrote an actual fucking script for the first time since friggin' 2019. I feel like I've exercised a little bit of a demon, so if you're a longtime fan of the channel, I hope this maybe brought back some of that older spirit and lived up to your expectations. I'm not gonna lie, I'm in a bit of a identity crisis with what I want to do with this channel and content in general, and to be honest, my life, but we'll figure stuff out, So yeah, I have at least one more essay planned, totally different topic, but I hope you'll still come around, and I'll see you there.